Hi, I'm Jeremy. Welcome to our farm, Cornucopia Orchards. We've got a lot going on right now. We have roofing that needs to be done, decking that needs to be done. We're going to be starting into siding pretty soon on the house that's below me there. And we're also out in the field trying to get a pasture prepped and ready for seeding before the rain stops completely for the season. So I'm cutting out all of the remaining rafters that I have, which is not going to be all of them. I'm going to have to order a few more for the lower porch roof. I had held off and I had some intention of doing some kind of temporary support structure on top of the joists for the ceiling on the porch roof, and then putting scaffolding up to be able to start work on the top roof, which, you know, it's so far up there. It's like 40 feet in the air instead of renting a lift. But I don't think I'm going to do that at this point. So I've taken some liberties with the plans. The plans called for a 3-on-12 pitch, and I'm doing 4-on-12 pitch. I've marked off the top. This board is actually my, I guess, guide board, if you will, our prototype. And I've got a cut in so that that matches up to the bottom joist that sticks out past the beam and delineates where the fascia and the soffit and all that jazz will come together around here. So I'm not securing these on the top just yet. They are angled to be basically flush. And that's kind of what I'm starting with, is making sure that top side is nice and flush with the top. Sheathing goes up over it to the wall and then gets flashed. And I'll align them and get all that stuff in once I've got all the rest of this that I can get done. So this one, I'm just gonna go ahead and cut. I put a few of them up, decided to just cut them, and then figured why not go ahead and get them done beforehand. So this one is pre-cut along the bottom here to match. So these H1s are holding that in, and there will be cross bracing on those as well. And I'm using screws on these just as a temporary hold, because if I make a mistake, it's easier to back it out if that slips up there at the top and isn't in line anymore while I'm trying to attach. And so I'm going to put in a few of these struck screws and then just leave them in, and then the rest will be nails. All right, so our doubled up hip beam is in place. And so a couple of ways you can look at, you know, how do you figure out where you're going to sit on there. I just took a level, box level, and threw a line up just on the vertical, and then double checked that by finding how far out I was until you came to that intersection. And then on this board, mark that off and then pull the tape across to make sure that we were, you know, 24 inches center to center, and indeed that's where you need to be. So either method will work, provided the lower structure is square. Next, we're going to go ahead and put our angle cut onto our rafter. Now we're going to put the 45, because we're 45 from the beam, and make sure that you have the board flipped the right way so that it's going to be either the left side or the right side of the beam.
Go sit. You can watch Daddy from there. So we're going to try and get Jeremy through this very small opening, since we've taken up part of the opening for our pig passageway. But he has some work he wants to do in the pasture. Well, he's going to make it. This is the advantage of compact tractors. We're going to put it back in there. They've got plenty there. Hi.
Then I'll gather up all the branch sections and I'm gonna put them over the fence. We can just deal with it when we deal with the next section, you know?
Yeah.
All right, we are out in lower paddock. And I've got pretty much that pile gone. And this one wants to say hi. Hi. That is my foot. That is my foot. We've got a fair amount of work left to do in getting some of the bigger branch pieces out. Some still in there. I've got most of it out. A couple of spots here where this is the trench where the septic line runs up and they kind of sunk down. It's pretty, you know, soft from last year still. You are just being silly. And this whole pasturage here is going to be eventually a vegetable garden and strawberries and all that stuff. And then the top half, all of that is going to be berries. And then the far section, when we get around to clearing that and putting all that out, is going to be where we have our trees. And there's some level issues. You know, we've got some hillocks, some depressions, but we're going to go through and plow all this. And normally I'm not a huge fan of plowing, certainly not over and over, but it'll help get rid of these, our brambles. It'll help me to get rid of the small clumps of these hazelnuts that I don't want all of them in the pasture, which is eventually going to be the orchard. And then it's going to help with getting rid of the remaining poison oak, which there are a few of them. In fact, you can see right through here, those little tufts looking things, they haven't leafed out yet, but those are all poison oak. There was a huge patch kind of around that dead tree last year, and the pigs have rooted up all through that area. So we have some work to do to get all of that out. But I'm super excited that, you know, we're really close now to being able to actually start getting in here and finishing, you know, our transformation of this landscape. So the idea when we get around to the vegetable garden is we're going to do a Ridgedale style, you know, kind of a market garden, and run beds with compost as a top dressing and not till it any more than we absolutely have to, you know, get in there and disturb the soil. We'll try and avoid once they're in place. And then we're going to do, you know, wood chip in all the pathways in between, nice thick layer of wood chip. And, you know, there's a host of benefits. Piggies are out turning through for us. They'll unearth any of the larger branches that they come across while they search for worms and other small tasty morsels. And all the smaller branches are partially decomposed, and I don't really mind if they get mixed in with the soil. They'll just be added nutrients for whatever we grow, and only a longer stick is going to cause any of the tools that we're going to use through here any trouble. It's a nicer day than it has been in a while, and one of the things we're working on this week, we have a stretch of weather, so we're going to be working on some of these short roofs, pre-assembled rafter and soffit hanging boards here for these little mini roofs, and pre-marked everything off. This is the exact center of the building. I don't have the help that I would need to get the top roof done right at this week, unfortunately, but we're going to go ahead and work on some of the shorter ones. The weather's almost to a point where it doesn't matter anyway, and we are still easily within the 6-month window for the roof material to still be just fine.
These mini roofs on the gable ends of the house aren't necessary, strictly speaking, and we actually considered omitting them. But they do serve a useful purpose, in addition to looking nice, as they break up the tall walls visually, They also protect the windows from direct water exposure and provide some protection from the sun. Water can't find its way through a wall assembly it can't reach, and the roof standing off of the wall means it provides shade and an additional buffer to warmer or colder outside air.
Old board. This is a new board. They're actually about a year apart in age. Same lumber yard, best as I'm aware of, certainly the same supplier. And you can really see the difference between a board that has finished aging and drying. Dimensionally speaking, that's a big change. That is actually right now 5 5/8 by 1 5/8, and that one is now 5 3/8 by 1 3/8. There's a reason why on some of the interior finishes in particular, you're required to have, a 1/4 inch or 3/8 or 1/8 of an inch of clearance. It's because your whole house could potentially shrink by that much in some directions. But there will be some change in your house as it dries under construction. And if the construction goes very fast, unlike this house, which being constructed by one family with one person doing most of the work, you could have the whole house built and then still dimensionally have a long way to go for it to be, finally settled.
Necessity is the mother of invention, so they say. Well, the breadth of construction tools that have been invented fascinates, and competition in the industry, just like any other, has necessitated their invention. However, for a non-professional like myself, necessity runs the other direction. I keep having to come up with ways I can easily do jobs on this build by myself or with more basic tools, because our necessity is that we do not have the scale to make the economy of all these awesome tools and gadgets make sense, or to hire additional help. I didn't know how I'd tackle these little roofs until I started, and well, this was a way I could ensure consistency and ease of install as a one-man crew.
Up into 60s and 70s, and there's a beautiful view with the white snow-capped hills and mountains. Is going to be a little bit less snow-capped in a couple of weeks here. We've got a next little section of lumber. Got our fascia boards for the roofs that we're working on. All right, we're just reworking the last little bit of the fence here. Casey's getting the gate reattached in, so the boys will have access to this mud, which will kind of clean that up a little bit as a pass through, and then continue to have their tree house while we deal with this lower paddock here. You can see that we've locked the piggies out of their shelter. Rain season is about done, and they do have some places for now. They can get underneath the little roof section up there or under the trees out here. We've also run that whole fence line there. They're confined up into here. So you can see we've put a fence in over to that gate, comes along the upper half. The piggies are now just in the top. The grass is growing really fast right now, and there's more brush up here for them to root at this point than there is down here. So we're gonna go ahead and keep them off of the bottom end, keep them up into here. We have some work to do up here for sure before we can do what we're gonna start pretty quick on the bottom half. We got to get rid of that pile. That needs taken apart and moved out of the way. There's still some big brush that needs to be cut up and gotten rid of. But down here, all we really have to do is a few log pieces, this pile of wood, some logs down there in the corner, and then we're ready to start this field. So my Kubota here is having some issues, which is great timing considering where we're at. I'm thinking I need to replace the fuel filter, our sediment bowl, a water separator is not the issue. I've purged the lines for the air and I'm still losing some power. It's right around the time, I think, if I remember correctly, when I'm gonna need to replace that guy anyway. So we gotta get that done this week. This whole lower section of field here, we're gonna get it subsoiled with a ripper. We're going to plow it. I have a 2-disc plow, and then we're going to get it disked, and then we're gonna put seed in.
There he is.
Out getting a lot of different chores done in the sunshine. We have a beautiful week, and fun fact, we went to try and start the metal roof, and the company we'd ordered from neglected to include any screws. So instead we got the chicken area cleaned up, got all of our extra stuff stored where the goats and then the pigs had been here under the shelter, getting all of the wire and fence moved out of the way. We're gonna take that down up there, the pig shelter up there. And I finally got started on the field out here. This feels really good. So thought we had a whole film of it, and turns out it was, did not work. So I've got a few more spots to subsoil, and I'll show you exactly what, what we're doing and what it does. So this piece of metal here is my subsoiler. It's a single bar, and on a tractor, a mid-sized tractor, I don't want to overload it. So I just got this guy. I think he was $150 or $200 a couple years ago. He's got a nice boot. You just put it, using your bar, you put it at the angle that you want where it's going to help dig in, but not necessarily too aggressive. And it's thick enough metal that it does a good job. So the distance that we have here in total is about 22 inches, I think, maybe 24 at the most. And that's, really good where you've got, a depth that you need to get to. They do make rippers for bigger tractors than this, 2 or even 3 tines. And you want it to be able to dig deep and to be able to basically just disturb the soil. You're not trying to turn it with subsoiling, and it makes it better as a cutting device. Springtime, obviously, and everything is beautiful out right now. And just looking at this tree, you might think, well, the roots are probably right in here, right? Well, one of the old ways of looking at a lot of, at least, vase-shaped, or however you want to call it, deciduous type trees, is that the roots extend out the same distance, which would be like right there, as the branches. And so you want to be careful not to really damage your tree by cutting it too close. Now this poor thing has been heavily abused. Multiple trees fell this way and that way around this tree and stripped those branches when we were clearing for the shop. And then right in there, fairly close, there's a trench we had to cut. So that tree has lost half its roots last year, and it's in recovery. So I was very careful not to get too close, into the major roots. And you can see that I'm subsoiling this way. So hopefully we didn't do much more of any damage to this thing before it gets a chance to recover, which takes a couple years. You can see the slope behind me here. It runs up this way and down that way. And so I'm running my subsoiling, on contour. Not exact, I didn't take a surveyor to it or anything, but roughly on contour to the hillside with these subsoil rips. They're deeper than I will plow, and I will plow multi-directionally, and these subsoil rips will allow water and air to get down lower and spread across the landscape. So they'll hit these trenches that are dug by the subsoiler, and then they're going to go this way, right? And so then they'll fill up that line before they then spread down the hillside. And that's not as critical here as it is in places that get good summer rain to be able to capture and keep that rain on your land. We basically get dumped on in the winter and spring, and then nada through the summer. That hasn't always been the case here, but over the past 10, 15 years, that's been more or less common. But nevertheless, you know, this landscape will benefit from that as we do things like irrigate. You know, it will, any water that is extra in the irrigation to what the plants need will follow those channels side to side and then spread down the hillside and then side to side again. So that's why we subsoil rip back and forth across contour, and it will really help make sure that, you know, we get good aeration as well as bust up, you know, any roots that are in the way before I take the plow through, which has got, you know, multiple teeth to it. And I mean, you can see there's one there that's from a tree that I ripped out previously, you know, kind of up in here. And it's also helping me to get out some of these clumps of hazelnuts and destroy the last vestiges of poison oak. So one thing that can be kind of difficult with the equipment that I have, which does not include an excavator at the moment, although I could rent one, is just timing to make sure that it's worth the investment of cash, you know, do multiple things at one time. If I want to try and get rid of these clumps of hazelnuts, you know, it's pretty much impossible to just take a bucket of a tractor of this size and hit these and get them to pull out of the ground. However, if I run past them, you can see I've got, you know, a trench that comes up to this one. If I run past these two, you know, come back and do them again on both sides, and then one on that side, and then one rip down this side with that subsoiler, then I may be able to just hit these with the bucket and push them out. Here's this guy, and he is one of the ones that we had shredded last year, and you could see the old stand there. And he's not huge, but he's got plenty of roots in this bucket, and we're en route with him to go and plant him in down there along the driveway. Brought some of the soil that he came from, and then we've got some mulch up here that we're going to add to it. And hopefully this hazelnut will be, you know, growing nice and helping us provide some privacy and some shade and some habitat within the next 2 years. It will take it a while to recover. in the mid-afternoon now, and we've done just a full round all the way through, and I've managed to rip out pretty much all of the little brush hazelnuts. And, you know, using the subsoiler and the bucket, doing some digging and cutting and digging and cutting. So that's all cleaned out behind me there, except for one or two that are kind of off, you know, where I'm not as concerned, or I really don't want to try and cut into them. Like there's one underneath one of the big fir trees where I don't want to do damage to some major roots because I want that tree to stay. And next up is we're gonna get the tractor fueled up again, and the hillside is about to start being in shade. So I'm gonna be getting another pass through in between all of the rows that I already did. So the rows right now are a tractor width apart essentially, because what I was doing was, you know, obviously the subsoiler is centered on the back of the tractor, and I would just line up the wheels next to the previous row where I'd subsoiled. So with that being the case, you know, if I kind of straddle the previous rips, I can put another line through. And I hadn't planned on doing that, but I'm going to, because the field had a lot of roots, even where I wouldn't have expected there to be any roots, like, you know, unexpected hazelnut, you know, bunches and whatnot. And I don't want to damage my much more expensive plow. It's a much nicer piece of equipment. So we're going to get that hooked up after I've done another subsoil, and probably run that next week early. Boy, it's a hot one out here today. You guys hear about the wooden tractor? Had wooden tires, wooden transmission, and it wouldn't work.
Thanks for watching. Join us on our next episode as we finish out this field. Hit the subscribe button for more, and if you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and leave a comment. It really helps us out a lot. These videos take hours of our time to make, and once we hit 1,000 subscribers, YouTube will start sharing their revenue with us. See you next time.